What would you do if your ex-partner and their mother conspired to have you thrown out of university with a web of lies? In today's story, the protagonist faced that very nightmare, but their response, or rather his mother's response, was a masterclass in how to handle it. A little groundwork is necessary to understand the sheer scale of this story. At the time, I was a 19-year-old, second-year biotechnology student. It's also relevant to know that I'm autistic and have a whole collection of social issues, which is a polite way of saying that navigating emotions is like trying to solve calculus in my head. It's not something I do easily or well. Then you have the key players. There was me, who we'll call Leo. There was my then fling, now my fiancé, Faye. And then there were the antagonists of our story, my ex, Chloe, and her mother, Sharon. But the most important character, the one this story truly revolves around, is my mother, Eleanor. To say my mother, Eleanor, is an intimidating woman would be an understatement. She lives with her boyfriend, who holds a very high-level position in high-risk security at the BBC and also runs a private military contractor, or PMC. My mother works as the head administrator for that PMC. And let's just say most of the hardened operators who work there owe her a favor or two. When she talks about her job, you'd be forgiven for thinking it was something straight out of a James Bond film. My ex, Chloe, was what you'd call a real bunny boiler. 90% of the time, she was lovely and sweet, though a bit childish, seeming more like a 16-year-old than the 19 she was. But that other 10%? Pure, unfiltered crazy. During our relationship, she would trigger breakdowns in me about once every 2 weeks and gaslight me constantly. Our friends just figured I was struggling with the stress of exams, and behind Chloe was her mother, Sharon, a controlling, self-obsessed woman who was utterly convinced her daughter was an angel who could do no wrong. She puppeteered Chloe, feeding her the lines she wanted her to say. We all lived together, myself, Chloe, and a few friends, in university accommodation. It was the kind of setup where you get your own room and bathroom but share a kitchen and common area. The rent and all utilities were covered by the university. It felt expensive at the time at £100 a week, though I know some people hearing that now would probably laugh and call it a bargain. Our story begins as our relationship was crumbling. Chloe was criticizing me more and more, and my breakdowns were becoming more frequent. The inciting incident was a set of beautiful, expensive porcelain roasting trays. They were the last gift my grandmother gave me before she passed away, and they were incredibly precious to me. The one rule in our shared kitchen was simple: no one touches them but me. One day, while cleaning the kitchen with our flatmates, Chloe decided to put them away. She dropped one, shattering it. My friends whispered that she did it on purpose, but I brushed it off, assumed it was an accident, and just asked her to replace it. About 2 weeks later, we broke up, and the Easter holidays arrived. Most of the flat went home, but I stayed behind for work. For her own reasons, Chloe stayed too, along with one other flatmate, a girl named Liv who had a car. Over the break, a girl from a university club, Faye, started flirting with me. Being autistic, I was completely oblivious until Liv bluntly told me to take the poor girl on a date. So I did. I asked Liv to give us a ride. As we were getting in the car, Chloe ran out and tried to jump in, insisting she was coming with us. We were floored. We told her absolutely not. But this was just the beginning. She started acting like we were still together, constantly creeping on me, trying to get into my room at night, and always managing to be in the kitchen whenever I was there, often in revealing clothes. As if that wasn't enough, she just stopped washing herself or her clothes. This reveals Chloe's most dangerous flaw, a deep-seated narcissism that allowed her to believe her own fabrications. A trait that would ultimately drag her entire family down with her. I reported her behavior to the accommodation office, as you're supposed to. Their advice? Man up and just deal with it. 2 weeks of this torment passed, and we were heading into exam season. I didn't care about her games. I just wanted to focus on my exams and get my roasting dish replaced. I asked her politely about it one day. She was in her room watching anime and told me, in no uncertain terms, to get lost, claiming she was too busy revising. A few days later, during a power outage, I was sitting in the laundry building using my phone's data. I decided to find a replacement myself. It took less than 10 minutes to find one on Amazon for about £40. I sent her the link on Facebook, even pointing out she could use my Prime account to get it delivered in 2 days, and then we'd never have to interact again. This apparently crossed a line. She stormed down the hall to my door, banging on it, screaming, swearing, just being completely unhinged. That's when I finally lost my temper. I yelled at her to shut up, telling her she needed to get her life in order, replace what she broke, and for God's sake, take a shower. She turned and stalked away, still screaming down the corridor. I just wanted to end the drama, so I reached out and grabbed her shoulder to get her to stop and face me so we could finally resolve this. She spun around and tried to punch me. On instinct, I raised my arm to defend myself, and the motion knocked her over. Faye, who had been relaxing in my room, saw the entire thing. Chloe immediately started screaming that I had assaulted her and ran into her room. I just went to take a shower, trying to calm my frayed nerves. Now, this next part one only found out later from friends. After running into her room, Chloe apparently took a choker, hung it from her coat hooks, and pressed her neck against it to create red marks. She then called her parents, crying, and told them I had tried to strangle her out of nowhere. She refused to talk to the police, which is telling. However, Faye, an absolute godsend, insisted that we go to the police station and file a pre-form statement, a document that puts your side of the story on record in case the other party decides to lie later. Soon after, Chloe's mother, Sharon, arrived. She moved into Chloe's room for several days, a clear violation of the accommodation rules, which required booking for any guest staying more than one night. Sharon immediately started making life hell for the entire flat, trying to conduct her own investigation and interrogating everyone. People started avoiding her, so she went to the accommodation office, reporting me and providing a mountain of falsified evidence. Sharon, in her blind arrogance, made a critical error at that moment. She thought she was targeting a lone, vulnerable student, completely unaware she was about to declare war on a woman who commanded the respect of private military contractors. I was called into the office and told what was happening. When I asked to see the evidence against me, the university refused. I was 19, completely lost, and had no idea what to do, so I called the one person I knew could handle it, my mother, Eleanor. I will never forget her words. Her voice was apocalyptic. She said, "Sit tight, do nothing, sign nothing, I will be down tomorrow." My mother is a lovely woman, but she possesses an unholy ability to terrify anyone. The whole flat had met her once before, and they'd all told me, if she is ever coming down again, give us a warning so we can run. The only warning they got this time was my neighbor, Sam, getting a knock on his window at 10 a.m. It was Eleanor. We lived in a gated area with security guards, and to this day, none of us know how she got in after a 4.5-hour drive. She was dressed impeccably, like a lawyer about to enter a courtroom. Sam, understandably, let her in. I woke up, showered, and found her in the kitchen, sipping a cup of tea Sam had made for her. The look on his face was one of pure dread. A friend of mine later said that describing Sam's expression as a man who'd just been informed there was a live grenade in his rectal cavity was the most beautiful and accurate prose he'd ever read. And honestly, he wasn't wrong. Eleanor then asked Sam to gather everyone else in the flat, except Chloe and Sharon. It was phrased as a polite request, but we all knew it was an order. She then turned to me and asked where Chloe and Sharon were. I told her they were likely out, as the university had told them to avoid being in the same room as me. What followed was less of an interview and more of a series of interrogations. Eleanor calmly and methodically questioned every single member of the flat about the events of the last few months. She then asked each of them to write down everything they had just told her and sent her a signed copy. Next on her list were the people from the accommodation office. She sat down with them, her politeness sharp and precise, like a lawyer dismantling a hostile witness. Their own warm, professional demeanors evaporated, replaced by that same grenade in the anus expression that Sam had worn earlier. When she was finished dissecting their failures, she handed them a small business card. "Any further communication with my son is also to be copied to me, and my lawyer," she said, her voice quiet, cold, and utterly terrifying. "Both emails are here." They practically fled the room. A hearing was arranged for about a month and a half later, between my exams and resits. In the interim, I went home, and Eleanor had me see several professionals who asked countless questions and wrote official letters. This period of calm was crucial, allowing me to recover from nearly 6 months of mental abuse before the final confrontation. On the day of the hearing, Sharon was there, glaring daggers at my mother. Eleanor greeted her by her full name, despite having never met her. She then proceeded to ask about Sharon's other child, her job, her oldest kid's job, and her husband's job, all by name. Sharon looked completely stunned into silence. I was just sitting there, wearing a suit, wondering when my mother had become an information broker. Chloe, for her part, showed up in a ridiculous bell dress and a pair of actual cat ears. Inside the hearing, they finally presented Sharon's evidence. Eleanor didn't just refute it, she tore it to shreds. She systematically pointed out how the accommodation office had failed in its duty of care, how they had ignored my reports of harassment and abuse, and how they had sided with Chloe without question while constantly challenging my story. She then produced the letters from psychologists, which basically confirmed that Chloe was unstable and that Sharon's interference had only made things worse. The university conduct panel just nodded, trying desperately to keep straight faces. According to my mother, they knew they were in deep trouble. Afterward, we all met together. I said all I wanted was an apology and for my roasting dish to be replaced. Sharon sneered that she would rather go to court than apologize for me assaulting her daughter. It was then that my mother stood up. She thanked the university panel for their time and said that as long as this doesn't escalate, she looked forward to seeing them at my graduation. Then she turned her gaze to Sharon. She thanked her and said, with a chilling placidity, "I hope you have an interesting summer." That quiet, chillingly polite phrase wasn't just a farewell, it was a declaration. Sharon just didn't realize that her family's fate had already been sealed. On the way out, I asked Eleanor what that was all about. That's when she finally showed me her hand. Sharon worked as a school cafeteria lady. Any formal investigation related to children, which this could easily become, would trigger a DBS background check and likely get her fired. Chloe's dad worked at a bank that was about to go through major layoffs, a bank for which my mother's PMC was handling a very large, very important contract. And Chloe's older sister worked as an exam invigilator, a job that requires a spotless criminal background check. The fallout was total. The last I heard, Sharon's and her husband's professional lives were in ruins, and only the elder sister still had her job. Chloe was asked not to return to university accommodation and was told that if any of her future modules overlapped with mine, she would have to transfer or take them in a different year. That was all about 2 years ago. I graduated with a good degree and am now living with Faye. Our flatmates are still great friends, and we see each other every month. My ex's mother went up against a woman who operates like M from James Bond, and she learned a very hard lesson. The whole affair taught me that some people will build a pyre of lies to try and burn you, but they often forget to check who's holding the matches. In the end, my ex and her mother learned that a person's true power isn't in their volume, but in their reach. So, let me ask you, when faced with a lie that could ruin your life, do you trust the system to save you, or do you call in your own version of